For more on this, let's bring in Shadow Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Ted O'Brien. Thanks for your time. This is mostly under the auspices, if you like, of the coalition. It's not going well so far. What do you make of this latest update?
Hello, Tom. Good to be with you. I think we need to look at this latest update in a broader context of Labor's energy and climate policies, which are really in tatters at the moment. They can't achieve their price target, nor their emissions target, nor their renewables target. And only last week, an energy economist independently came out with a figure of a $60 billion hole, a black hole of $60 billion in Chris Bowen's climate and energy policy. And then this morning we find out that since Labor has come to office, the price tag for Snowy 2.0 has effectively doubled from $6 billion to $12 billion. And so I think this raises a series of questions for the Minister once the report on Snowy 2.0 gets released, and we believe that will be tomorrow.
We'll see that, no doubt. It'll be dissected. We're always keen to get the Minister on. But it seems a bit cute to say that this has simply doubled under Labor's watch. I mean, all the foundations for this were developed under the coalition. And a lot of experts say one of the biggest issues was the sort of geological formations around here, some of the soft soil, and that's been a huge part of this delay. So doesn't the coalition, having come up with the idea, told us how much it would cost, it's meant to be finished, remember, 2 years ago, so Labor shouldn't have had anything to do with this. It should have been done. We can't ignore that, can we?
Tom, I don't think you can ignore that this is indeed one of the most complex engineering feats for Australia. That's always been the case. And I think it's timely at the moment, as there's going to be debate around the enormous doubling of price, to give credit for those people who have been working on this project. Some of Australia's sharpest minds are doing the hard work, and they continue to. And they deserve nothing but our absolute respect. However, when it comes to looking at the coalition, when we left office, the Australian National Audit Office audited Snowy 2.0, and they released their conclusions, and their conclusions were all positive about how well the project was being managed, how effective the governance framework was. That's when the coalition left office. And, you know, Tom, we also only heard this morning from the former CEO of Snowy, Paul Broad, that when he left his position, which again, that was when Labor came in, they got rid of him, the funding envelope was around about $6 billion. So you got 2 points there. Funding envelope, $6 billion. The Australian National Audit Agency saying, yep, good work, everything's going well. And now, fast forward, under Labor's watch, that's now doubled to $12 billion. And so my question to the Minister is this, if I can.
Yeah, go on.
The key question I have to the Minister is, I understand from Paul Broad's comments this morning and previous media articles that under his watch, he fundamentally changed the contracting arrangement for Snowy 2.0 away from a fixed fee arrangement to a cost plus arrangement. Now, when you make such a change, the risk is you are effectively shifting the responsibility away from the prime contractor to the taxpayer. Suddenly now, as a cost plus arrangement, it's on Snowy 2.0, therefore the taxpayer, to be picking up the bill for any blowouts, managing any risks. Now, when you change the fundamentals of a contracting arrangement, it has a material impact. This is one of the things we need to be answered.
Let me jump in here. You're saying the Minister changed that cost responsibility, if you want, and that's the reason you're putting down this cost shift too? You're saying that based on what Paul Broad said publicly?
Tom, what I'm saying is my key question to the Minister, once this report gets released tomorrow for him to answer, is it true that he signed off on a change to the contracting arrangement from a fixed fee to a cost-plus arrangement? If so, why? Did that have an impact on this price change?
All right. Well, we'll only know tomorrow.
So
once Perhaps someone will put
Tom,
that to him. Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you. Yeah. You've prosecuted that. Fair enough. I'm sure it'll be asked of him. I'm going to ask the next question. We're limited on time.
Sure.
Where we're at right now in terms of Snowy 2.0. So what's the option? Do we need to sort of look at what it's delivering in terms of storage versus cost, and perhaps see if other storage options are more viable? It'd be a pretty wild thing to do to stop it mid-project. But is that how drastic the cost situation's become?
Tom, I think it's premature for anybody to be making commentary on that when they haven't seen a report that's going to be due out tomorrow. So let's wait and see. I think, though, your point's a very good one in terms of the principle of challenging the broader decarbonisation for Australia. The Coalition believes in an all-of-the-above approach. We need to have all technologies on the table because it is so difficult. Labor has an ideological approach. There are some technologies they like, others they don't. It's all ideologically driven. They have not, still to this day, done economic modelling through Treasury or the Department on their 43% target for emission reduction, on their 82% renewable energy target. No economic modelling, and they wonder why every time Australians open up their power bills, prices are going up because they have not modelled it. Now, we believe all technologies should be on the table. You don't just cut off a technology, whether that's pumped hydro, or, by the way, zero-emission nuclear energy, something the government continues to refuse to engage in a sensible conversation about.
Okay.
All of the above, everything on the table, a balanced approach.
Again, so far it doesn't seem to be stacking up on a cost, but that might change with small modular reactors. They're in their infancy, we'll see. But look, we've spoken about it before, I'm sure we will again. I did want to finish on the Indigenous voice to Parliament. Effectively the PM firing the starter's gun today. I wonder if you've thought about this. If it does pass, should the Coalition work with Labor to enact the will of the Australian people and legislate for a voice?
If I can, by the way, Tom, beyond Chris Bowen and the Labor Party, any other authority who knows nuclear energy is not saying it's cost prohibitive. In fact, it's actually very effective. It's bringing down power bills. To answer your other question, though, I'm not going to be engaging in hypotheticals. At long last, the Prime Minister has announced the date for the referendum. I just wish he took the opportunity to also announce the detail for which the Australian people have been waiting about what this voice actually represents. That's what people are waiting for. Happy to engage on why it's important Australians know what they're voting for before they vote, rather than hypotheticals, with all respect.
But this hypothetical is around what you'll do if the referendum wins, i.e. to what extent you'll respect the will of the Australian people. Sure, you can call that a hypothetical, but so is, will you respect the victory of Labor if they win a federal election, to which, you'd expect you to say yes rather than a hypothetical. So isn't this a bit different to other ones? I'm asking, will you go by the will of the Australian people?
Well, it is a little bit different, Tom, because today is the day that the Prime Minister has announced when the referendum will take place. And I think what should be on the front of the mind of every Australian is how they're going to vote at that referendum. Will they take the risk in a permanent change that divides Australia by race or not? Yes or no? That is really where I think the discussion has to be, rather than looking at different permutations, what might happen after that vote is cast.
Yeah, but it's not a whole lot of permutations, it's yes or no.
The Australian people were given the detail beforehand.
Sure, but if it's yes, if they take this risk that you're speaking about, if it's yes, would the Coalition work with Labor on legislating a voice?
We've got one thing on our mind right now as a coalition, and that is to engage with the Australian people on the decision they all have to make. This is in the hands of the Australian people.
So you're reserving
now,
a judgment on whether you do that?
I'm not engaging in hypotheticals, and I apologise because I know you're trying to push me into it, but I'm not going to be going there on hypotheticals right now.
But you would, if I'm talking before a federal election, after the next federal election, you'll respect the Australian people's views and say, yes, Labor have been fairly elected, we believe in the result, they've won government. So what's the difference between that and saying, yes, we'll listen to the referendum vote and we'll work with Labor on passing something?
Well, Tom, why don't we make this agreement? The day that the Prime Minister calls the next federal election, why don't we do an interview and we have that chat then? At least I'll give you a firm view on the Voice, because it would have taken place. I'm just not going to engage in hypotheticals, if that's okay, Tom. I respect you for pushing me there, and you're very good at it. However, I'm just not engaging in hypotheticals. Right now, Australians have the biggest constitutional question ahead of them. That's the key issue here. I truly believe the average Australian saying, oh, you know, what's the coalition going to do afterwards, depending on this or that? That's not the key here. What's in the national interest is where the country comes down on enshrining a permanent change to the Constitution that the Prime Minister has failed to define. That's what's important. That's my focus, and hopefully it'll be the focus of the Australian people in the lead up to the 14th of October.
Okay, and in terms of that no case, do you feel concerned at all that there's a lot of negativity involved? Would we hear conversations later on perhaps about your plans to help close the gap, which ultimately both sides want to do?
I missed that last part. Ultimately what, sorry, Tom?
Ultimately both sides want to. They want to close the gap between First Nations people and non-First Nations.
Oh, look, I think you make a really good point there. I don't think it's just both sides of Parliament, Tom. I truly believe that every Australian wants the best for every other Australian, but in particular for vulnerable Australians, including many of our First Peoples, especially those in remote communities. There's just no doubt about that. I think what's before us, though, is the question of how best that be done. So I don't think there's any sort of divide in terms of intent. But when it comes to the question of how it be done, I believe Labor has chosen a pathway it's failed to define, and that is inherently divisive. And that's the problem. Right. And I just think it's unfair, Tom. I think it's really unfair to be asking Australians to cast a vote on something, but then say to them at the same time, we're not going to tell you how it works until after you vote. I just don't think that's fair, and I don't think Australians would think it's fair.
Ted O'Brien, thanks for your time today.
Thanks very much, Tom.